Why is Alessandro posting pictures of Superman on Facebook? Like right now, I'm in the middle of a project for my dad to revamp his food menu. And my approach, up until I saw some of your Superman images, was we're going to hire a photographer. So you're looking at a project that takes about a month
Yeah,
before you can get
yeah.
any pictures that are usable. What are your thoughts on the implications of AI based on what you've seen on photography and creativity? And hey, is this gonna replace? Is it gonna sustain? Is it gonna augment? What is this going to do? The training set could also have some of the biases, and as a result, it could generate this, correct? In this case, there's very little potential for plagiarism because again, the AI model should technically be generating these images that don't exist as opposed to using images. Am I correct? Is there a point where perfection becomes the problem? Where, as a human being, you kind of become desensitized. Hey, this is just too perfect. Do you feel like maybe it's not that far away, but the way they are releasing the AI technology and the advancement of the algorithm is in a controlled manner? Is that something fair? I can't help but feel like, I don't know, in 10 years, 20 years, the political conversation, the political debates around the world are going to be around people that are pro AI and people that are anti AI and people that think AI can make the better choice and should be in charge of the nuclear arsenal.
Congratulations!
You posted some pictures of Superman, I
Oh
think a
yes,
couple of
yeah,
weeks ago,
yeah, yeah.
and that was fascinating to me. At first, I'm like, huh, why is Alessandro posting pictures of Superman on Facebook? I'm like, maybe he's a fan. Like, it didn't click in my mind. I wasn't reading a lot of the comments you made, but then you posted a few, and I'm like, okay, what's going on? And if I'm not mistaken, correct me here if I'm wrong, those were AI generated images using prompts, right?
Correct. Yes, yes.
Okay. W- So the images were amazing. Like some of them, I'm like, this is cool. Like
Okay.
I even wanted to download that. But what help me understand a little bit, what were you trying to do? Like why Superman, or what was your point from these images?
So Superman is, of course, just one subject that everybody can relate to. Everybody has the image of Superman, so it's easy to judge the aesthetic quality of what I'm publishing, and that's the intent. I could have taken. Normally, I use three clowns for certain technical reasons, but I don't think everybody's happy about the three clowns, so I switched to Superman. Superman is easy. The reason why I posted these pictures of Superman is that they are amazing. They are AI generated, but the quality of the images is
It's
astonishing.
fantastic.
It,
Yeah.
it's not just HD, high resolution and 4K. It's just the details of the face and the colors is so vivid. It's absolutely amazing. And you might say, okay, what's important about this, what's worth sharing in on social media. And the reason is this, is that we had AI to do image generation and video generation for 2 years now, since the release of Stable Diffusion 1.4 by a company called Stability AI. And at the beginning, these images were absolutely dreadful. They were terrible. And then they were a little bit less terrible. And then in the last 6 months, they were actually quite very good, but not yet at the level of sophistication that you would say, oh, I could use this image in I don't know, advertising campaign on a
Right.
magazine, for example, or I could use it for a social media post by an important aid agency. You could not do that. They were not high quality. And even when they were, you would have to spend days to try to polish and clean the image. But now we got recently, in at the beginning of August, we got a new company called Black Forest Labs that has created a new open access model, like Stable Diffusion, and this new model is called Flux. And this Flux is unbelievable. It can generate exceptional images like the Superman one that you saw, but also many others. And so my clumsy attempt is to raise awareness on social media about the fact that there is this new model, which is open access, that companies can use to create really professional, high quality, highly detailed images like it was not possible in the last 2 years. That was the intent.
So I've got something I want to talk to you about, real world use case, but I want to go through a bunch of other questions. So you generated these images using just prompts.
Correct.
Okay. Why did it choose this specific Superman? Like, why not, I don't know, Christopher Reeves? Did you have to specify which Superman to use? Like, give me an idea of the prompt. Because again, the images I had to, one of them I had to Google image to see if, hey, was there like a pack of these images? It was amazing. So this wasn't just taking a regular Superman image and superimposing it on like a background, right?
No.
This was completely generated.
Yeah, completely. So normally when you write a prompt for this text to image AI models, you write a reasonably long prompt where you say all the things that you want. You want the facial expression of Superman, potentially the resembles with one actor that the model might know during the training phase. You want to talk about the colors. You want to talk about what's in the background. You want to talk about lots of different things. And you do that not just because you want control, because these models without controls are useless, but you also because you want to see, you want to understand how well the model understands a huge variety of concepts and ideas. In this particular case, though, I wanted to show that effortlessly the Flux model could generate incredible picture. And so in this case, in this particular case, the prompt I use is one single word, and the word is Superman. And that's it. That's it.
And it automatically chose this particular Superman.
Well, it chosen this for that generation. Every time you click the button generate,
It
he
might choose a different Superman.
he adds to the generation a parameter that's called seed that generates some random noise, which means that every generation is different. And so every time you click generate, you have a different type of Superman that might be slightly similar, completely different, all variations. What cannot happen is that, or should not happen, is that the model invents a Superman that is, I don't know, Chinese, or a Superman that is Afro-American, but not because it's not allowed. It's
Just because
because
it doesn't exist.
it should
Yeah.
not be in the training data set. You can still create that, you can still do it, but you
But
need
you
to
have
be,
to act.
yeah, you need to specify with this prompt, I want an Afro-American or a Chinese or a Korean or whatever, Superman. Then you would do it. Then it will do it. But with just one word prompt, you should go more towards what was in the training data set rather than generalize. And so,
Unless the training data set has some form of, look, there's a lot of this DEI stuff that's going on. So the training set could also have some of the biases. And as a result, it could generate this, correct?
any data set in the world has a bias, because
Right,
remember that the data comes from humans. Humans are biased. And
right.
so if we have generated 87 million pictures of a white, tall, black hair Superman, that's the bias. It's human bias, okay?
Right.
But the human bias can never be eradicated fully from a data set. What can happen and should happen, and is happening with Flux, is that the better the model, the higher is the capability of the model to do a thing which is called generalization, which means the model in the dataset has learned how an Afro-American man look like, or a Chinese woman look like, and it knows how Superman looks like. So what does he do? If you ask, give me a Chinese woman a photo of Superman, a Chinese woman version of Superman, the model should be able, if it's really good, should be able to generalize the feature of Superman that he has seen over millions of pictures, and generalize the feature of a Chinese woman, and then merge these two generalizations together and create exactly what you want. A Chinese woman Superman, completely possible. But the model has to be good. The model has to be good at generalizing. Flux is really good at generalizing, which means that if I ask it in the prompt, do Chinese woman a Superman, it will do it. Other models will struggle with that.
In this case, there's very little potential for plagiarism because, correct me if I'm wrong, because again, the AI model should technically be generating these images that don't exist as opposed to using images. Am I correct? Is that a fair assumption?
In theory, yes. In practice, not so much. Meaning that with every model, not just image generation model, but also large language model, the one that use the transformer architecture, like ChatGTP4 and so on, there is always the risk of a leak of the portions of the data set for very technical reasons that I think would be too boring to describe here. But the point is that it is possible that it happens, and in fact, it happens a little bit too often. And so, even if you don't, if you end user don't intend to generate the image of a celebrity, you might end up accidentally generating one. And so, the companies that offer these AI models as a centralized service, or companies like Black Forest Labs that offer the open access model that you can download and use, they use a series of tricks to be sure that when the model receives a prompt like generate a Superman that looks like Keanu Reeves, just making up, the model has been trained in such a way that when it reads the word Keanu Reeves, this is a celebrity, does something weird, something bad. And so the image doesn't come out nicely. It comes bad, or it comes deformed, or it comes in weird way. At the beginning, it was not like this. 2 years ago, it was not like this. And so everybody was using Stable Diffusion 1.4 and 1.5 to generate Scarlett Johansson, or you name it, whatever name of woman, occasionally men, mostly women, that was in the data set. And then, of course, there were a lot of lawsuits, and companies realized that this was not tolerable, was not ethical. And so they started to use these tricks to reduce the risk that you're going to get exactly what was in the data set. Sometimes it works, other times not quite. Plus, and this is the most interesting part, even if the model itself has been, let's say, censored, is not the right word here, but to simplify, has been constrained to avoid it generates Scarlett Johansson or Keanu Reeves, you can still do a fine-tuning operation and create a tiny model called LoRa, L-O-R-R-A, LoRa. And this tiny model called LoRa goes together with the base model, this flux model we're talking about. And this little thing teaches the big model how Scarlett Johansson looks like, or how you look like, or how I look like. And so all of a sudden, with just 20 images of the subject you want to teach and 3 hours of time on a consumer GPU, you can teach Flux or any other model Scarlett Johansson or Keanu Reeves. And so from that moment on, you can write, give me a Superman that is looking like Keanu Reeves, and he will do it. And it will be very precise.
This has huge implications on our creativity, right? So typically, like right now, I'm in the middle of a project for my dad to revamp his food menu.
Hmm.
And my approach, up until I saw some of your Superman images, was hey, we're going to hire a photographer, we're going to do a photo shoot.
Yeah.
Now, inherently, when you set yourself up to do something like this, you have all sorts of costs across the board. You have
Yeah.
to pay the photographer has to come in, the photographer has to set up, you have to make all sorts of food that you're either going to distribute or throw away.
Yeah.
It takes half a day or an entire day to get all of these pictures. Then the photographer has to go color correct, do whatever he or she needs to do, and then send them to you. So you're looking at a project that takes about a month
Yeah.
before you can get
Yeah.
any pictures that are usable. I'm now curious. I'm still going to do that, but I kind of want to run side by side this project that maybe we should publish results at some point on. I want to run side by side. Hey, this is what I got from a traditional photo shoot,
Mm.
and here's what AI did. Which set of images should I use? What are your thoughts on the implications of AI based on what you've seen on photography and creativity? And hey, is this gonna replace? Is it gonna sustain? Is it gonna augment? What is this going to do?
It's a great question, and I've been looking at this from the two sides of the fence. On one side, I have this newsletter that sometimes we mention called Synthetic Work, where I observe the impact of AI on jobs, and this is exactly the kind of situation that I collected a lot of data about. And on the other side, I have an R&D lab that does a lot of these things. I have clients all around the world that are either uh, small businesses like yours, your dad's, or are fashion photographers, or are creative agencies or studios that want to reduce the costs of what you described, the norms set up and the time that it takes to do the images. And so on one side, I'm concerned about what's happening. On the other side, I'm accomplice in a way to make it happen. So it's quite complex situation. So when it's hard to answer the question because without saying it, the usually it depends, because the thing that is important to clarify here is that it always depends on the time scale. In the short term, this is paramount. In the short term, these tools are going to augment human creativity. I'll give you one example. Your photographer that will come in and photograph the food and all the other things for I don't know what you have, a restaurant, might want to be creative, and I'm completely making up stuff here, and do a setup that where the food is prepared and somebody is eating this food ready to go out on a helicopter ride. As a rich person that is eating is ready to go, millionaire is ready to go for an helicopter ride. Now, in real life, using traditional techniques, this setup will cost you thousands and thousands and thousands. Find the space, rent the helicopter, make it arrive, take the things, fly it back, all these things, right? So there is constraints that we have in real world about to creativity that are not just in terms of budget, sometimes it's logistics, that make it impossible to realize certain ideas, even if we know that those ideas will work really well for our situation. But it's effortless and is cost zero for me to do exactly what I described with image generation. Now we can argue on how good the image will end up being,
Sure.
and that's my skill, that's my craft, right? To be sure that I can generate images better than many other people. But it's still doable. It's still possible. The cost for me or for the photographer is zero. So in the short term, the photographer will see in these tools, or the creative agency will see in these tools an extension of creativity. In the long term, though, as these tools become more capable and really, really, really good, to the point that you don't even need a photographer to say things like, okay, do this shot in 35 millimeters with a wide angle, and I want this depth of field that goes from left to right. You will not even need this, because eventually the AI models will become so good, they will be trained on the best of the best of the best pictures that are online, that what they generate with one word prompt, like in the Superman case we discussed, will be already good enough for your dad's restaurant or for the creative agency or whatever. And so all of a sudden, you're not just cutting the impossible cost of setting up the helicopter scene, but you're also cutting the creative person, the photographer, okay? That all of a sudden has become sort of a middleman without wanting to be. When I say these things, of course, people get very upset, like really upset. I know that who watch this will get really upset. But in the last 2 years, we have seen relentless progress in terms of being these models be more creative, be better, be so good that you press one button and it works. There's much more to do, but you press one button and it works. And so even the most skeptical people in the creative industry now, they're starting to say, okay, this is kind of a big deal, and I don't know if I like where this is going. So the situation is quite complex, in my opinion.
See, as you were talking, I mean, I see your point, but in my mind, I actually started to think about it a little differently. I think it's going to disrupt 100%, and I think that's inevitable, whether it's tomorrow or in a year or two. But you mentioned something super interesting, and that triggered a lot of thoughts. So you mentioned, hey, I could tell it I want you to take it, using a 35 millimeter lens, using this depth of field, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm,
And all of a sudden, it dawned on me that yes, this could impact, let's say, photographers, but at the same time, this could become the new tool that photographers and creative people use when they're creating their art, right? So instead of them having to bring their equipment, set up, take pictures, and again, you mentioned something, maybe I don't like the way they set it up. Maybe I don't like the way they plated it, but they already took the photo shoot. So for me to change it, I would have to bring them back and redo everything all over again.
that's right.
But if a photographer or a creative person is now in front of this prompt and is able to maybe tweak the AI to get the results that I'm looking for without necessarily having to do it the traditional way, then maybe that's how they evolve. Because look, there is no amount of chat GPT that you can give my dad where he'll be able to use it to generate anything useful that he could use. And that'll be the case for a lot of folks. So maybe these tools then replace the creative people's current tools, but there'll still be a need for you to figure out a prompt, for you to think of how you want to set this up. Because for a small business, I could do this for my dad. But there are tons of other restaurants where I don't exist. They don't have the time to sit and figure out how the image is going to look and what angle to
Right.
take it from
Yeah,
and what the shadow looks like. So maybe that's a natural evolution for them. It doesn't replace them, it just gives them new tools.
absolutely correct. But this is what I mentioned being in the short term. This is 100% what I meant by the short term augmentation of creativity. So you don't do, for example, I was talking to a fashion photographer last year. He was describing to me the insane cost of a fashion photo shooting that used to take 3 weeks and now takes 1 week, but you still need to take the model, the equipment, the entire set, the makeup artist and all the others, fly everybody to a remote location, let's say an island in Japan, do 3 days of photo shooting, move everything back. The cost is insane. And now you don't leave the studio, you do everything, or you try to do everything with that tool, right? So this is the short term. Yeah, you got it right. You got perfectly right. My concern, and something that people struggle a little bit to see, is the long term, the implications of this, because people don't expect that this model will get any better than what they already are. But I'll give you one example. If I'm training version 10 of Flux, okay, now we have Flux 1 that does Superman. Imagine fast forward Flux 10, and Flux 10 has in the training dataset exclusively the best movies ever produced by humankind. Whatever is your favorite film director, Francis Ford Coppola, you name it. The best movies ever in terms of photography, in terms of directions, in terms of narrative, everything. Okay? So the only thing that is in the training dataset is the stuff. Then your dad arrives, or any other small business that doesn't have you, to continue your example, and in the prompt say, create a commercial of this image of my food, period. That's it. And because Flux 10 has been trained only on the best movies ever, it spits out in a matter of seconds a 30-second commercial that looks like a Cannes award-winning movie. What do you do then? Where is the value of the photographer? You might say, yeah, but maybe the first movie, as beautiful as it is not what I had in mind as a business owner. No problem. You press the button 10 times
Do it again.
and you got 10 different award-winning movies. What are you going to do at that point?
That's
Th-
fair.
this is the problem that we're having. And again, to get to the quality of that Superman image that you saw on social media, up to 1 month ago, you had to use the base model, Stable Diffusion Extra Large, that was the best at that time, 1 month ago at that time. And you had to write the prompt, a very complicated, very long, with a lot of incantation to make it look like decent. And now you needed to pass through a number of additional steps to improve the imperfection and all the other stuff. So to do a really high quality images, it was an affair of a matter of an entire day or 2 days or 3 days, depending on the complexity. And now I press one button saying Superman in my prompt and nothing else, not even the period at the end, and he did it. And he did an amazing job that until yesterday would take 3 days, even with artificial intelligence. And so what I'm trying to say is that long term, this augmentation of or replacement of the tool for the creative might translate into a replacement of the creative itself. We skip the creative person as a middleman, as somebody that does the taste. This is the problem. Is the taste maker. A fashion photographer is not just a skilled person in photography, he's a taste maker.
I agree.
Just like an interior designer is a taste maker. The way I design my house is taste making. Now, you can agree or not, but the point is that it's taste making. But once I have an AI that does learn taste making from the best of the world, let's say it's been trained on the best pictures of Vogue ever in the last 100 years, or the best design from Vitra, another design brand from all over the world. What is the role of the human taste maker here? Where is the space for the human taste maker?
Let me see if I can push back. I don't know if I'm convinced with what I'm about to say, but I want to test it on you. And I love movies, and you brought up movies a couple of times. So one of my favorite movies of all time is The Godfather.
Yeah.
You made some hints to it. But The Godfather, for those that have researched it or know its history, was made on a very, very low budget. It was extremely low budget. Even the lighting was kind of ridiculous if
Yeah.
you look back. But it was a great script. It was a producers and directors that had the creativity to pull it off. But when you compare the production of The Godfather with, I don't know, the Avengers and all of the special effects and all the wowness when you were sitting in that movie theater for the first time and you're seeing these special effects, you have no choice but to be wowed. But here's my question. Is there a point where perfection becomes the problem? Where as a human being, you kind of become desensitized. Hey, this is just too perfect. I just want, I want something, I don't know, reminiscent of me. Yeah, the Polaroid pictures are becoming, they're coming back like they're in style. Like every other person, my niece loves the Polaroid. She wants to take a picture and just
Yeah.
have that
Yeah.
that antique look to it.
Yeah.
So is there a point where this AI perfection backfires? And to contradict myself, would it backfire enough, or would there be a little bit of a backfire, but that still is the norm?
It's a beautiful question, and it brings us to a corner where most of the time the conversation about these models never goes. So I'm happy to answer this question. And I can provide another example that is not as magnificent as the Godfather, but that is in line with what you're saying, and that is the Blair Witch Project. My daughter, 16 years old, loves horrors. So as soon as she got an age that was okay, I let her watch the Blair Witch Project. And that is another movie. It's famous for being on a very low budget. It's really fussy.
That movie scared me once. You should have not.
But the point,
I hate that
the
movie.
point that movie was on extremely low budget, done with equipment that was barely professional, if at all. So that's another perfect example.
And that's why it scared me so much.
Yeah, because it looked no polish real. That's why I bring it in, right? So we humans can tell the difference between too polished and a real, the uncanny valley, versus something that resembles reality. An AI, up to this point, has always produced uncanny images, either unreal or too beautiful to be real. Like if you do image generation with even with Flux, the stereotypical example that people put a man or a woman, only supermodels. Nobody's fat. Nobody's like me. Nobody's like me. Okay, and that's a problem because that tells you immediately, if you are somebody watching one of these images online, that is it's beautiful
Yeah.
to look at, but it doesn't resonate with you. Okay, so we're going where you want to go, but here's the objection. Here's the surprise. The AI has become so good that I can, and in fact, somebody has done last week this, I can train one of those tiny things, those tiny LoRa models that I mentioned before, on miserable, terrible pictures taken from, I don't know, Snapchat or MySpace in 2005, and apply that generalization, that model, to Flux. So Flux learns how shitty, miserable, ordinary pictures look like. So now, and literally now, I can do it now, I can create a photo of Elias and Alessandro eating a burger in front of the TV. If I do just with Flux, creates two beautiful men, perfect, just Greek statues, eating a burger, a perfect burger, Michelin star burger in front of the TV. If I do Flux plus the little LoRa I'm talking about, it creates what you see now, two normal people. And I have published images like that too on social media. And it's astonishing how realistic they look, how non uncanny valley anymore they look, how would fool anybody, how all of a sudden they start to resonate again with the watcher. So you're right that in theory AI makes everything too perfect, but in the same identical way, you can train AI to be very imperfect to the point of being indistinguishable.
You can give it a hand. That's interesting. I didn't think of that. Um, it's still, again, we're talking about it. It sounds too good to be true. It sounds too far away, even though I know it's not that far away. Let me ask you something. Do you feel like maybe it's not that far away, but the way they are releasing the AI technology and the advancement of the algorithm to us is in a controlled manner? Is that something fair?
With one exception, I would say no. With one exception, maybe two exceptions, I would say no. So the exception is OpenAI. OpenAI is under scrutiny by the US government and probably the Department of Defense, and the US Army wants to have an upfront notice and time to test the models before they are released into the world, because they must be able to prepare and defend against an opponent that will use those models to disrupt communication, disrupt elections, and so forth. So they need to have the time to understand how good the model can be. And also, I think it's naive to believe that all AI labs in the world are now under strict surveillance by pretty much every intelligence agency of the world. Everybody's looking at these guys. Everybody.
Absolutely. Half the employees work for the CIA.
But it's also possible. I will not be surprised. So there is information that suggests that OpenAI is constrained in the release of their models, especially if the upcoming GTP5 is going to be really at the level of a PhD and be autonomous in a way similar to a human being, which is the latest and greatest rumor. Then there are reasons to believe that this model has been postponed from getting in the hands of the general public. On the image generation model, there are minor constraints in the sense that a model even 2 years ago that was capable, and trust me, is absolutely possible, to create a nude version of Scarlett Johansson is constrained or not released, or there are other cases like child pornography where the model is not released. But it's possible to, unfortunately, it's possible to to train these models to do these things. But if you put aside this particular use cases, the reason why we don't get even more capable models faster, and I would say this is pretty fast right now, we're going at pretty fast pace, is simply that training this model costs millions of dollars, millions, and takes a lot of GPUs, and there is a shortage of access. Right now, not as much as during the summer, but there is a shortage of access to these GPUs. You have to think that the people that are the best in the world at doing training of these models working in art students that work in universities or research labs scattered all around the world. And these entities, these organizations typically are always cash strapped. And so it's hard for them to get access to this. So they need to do proof of concept that are tiny, get the interest of venture capital firms to get funding, and then they get access to big cluster of GPUs, and then they can go for, I don't know, 3 months of training, 1 month of training to release this model. So what I'm trying to say is that there is a technical time and a series of budget and logistic constraints that slow down the release of this model. You cannot, at the moment, you cannot industrialize the process. It's still a lot of art in understanding what to do it, and you really need a wizard, a talent to do this kind of things.
As exciting as it is, and my whole career was built on tech, and as exciting as this is, I can't. Again, and you and I have talked about this before. I can't help but feel like, I don't know, in 10 years, 20 years, the political conversation, the political debates around the world are going to be around people that are pro AI and people that are anti AI and people that think AI can make the better choice and should be in charge of the nuclear arsenal, or and folks that think and a plane that is driven by AI is better than a plane that's driven by a human. Like I have a feeling we're building Skynet, whether we like it or not, and all of these movies that we thought were sci-fi, 20 years ago. It's kind of hard to not think of, hey, somebody knew something back then. It's so hard to imagine what we're actually doing, but everything feels like it's leading to that culmination, and we're building Skynet, whether we like it or not. We're building it one piece at a time. We're building it slowly, but we're building it.
There is a case for AI being decentralized, meaning all the GPUs in the world connected together in a peer-to-peer network fashion that creates this network that is accessible by everybody, so that not only the rich guys can train new models. But even in that kind of setup, I still understand what you're saying. There is the risk to having all this GPU working together as a single entity. The key point, I agree with you that we are marching towards an inevitability, a little bit like Lemmings. I don't know if you remember the game, right?
Yeah.
You know there is the precipice in front of you, but you cannot do anything but marching, and we're marching. The outcome of that march is still uncertain. We don't know if we're going to end up like eliminating poverty, eliminating jobs, but in the positive way, meaning there is so much abundance that we don't have to do anything anymore, or in terms of devastations and poverty all around the world and centralization of power tenfold, hundredfold more than now. Both things are possible. The problem is that the argument that will lead to that precipice, whatever it leads to, are impossible to argue against. You mentioned, oh, well, people will start to argue that an AI, it's better equipped or more intelligent than us in making certain choices. It's hard to argue against that, but not because a computer is better than a biological brain. A physical computer is better than a biological computer. It's simply because, think about how you and I have learned all the things that we have learned. We have learned everything from the wisdom of the crowd. Somebody before us has written books. In turn, they have learned from other people that have written books or written internet pages. Doesn't matter really. And so we have learned. We are the byproduct of thousands of years of knowledge that has been shared and refined and polished and passed on and on and on. That's what we are. There is very little that is original about what I say or what you say. It's just a reaction, constant reaction with a little bit, an incremental improvement, right? Everything ends up being a remix. So if the AI is a mechanism that is more efficient at doing that game, learning from the collective wisdom and adding an incremental twist to that collective wisdom, it's hard to argue that it's less likely to be more wiser than us. How can you argue that? If he uses the same mechanism, if he relies on the same learning mechanism, why would be better for us to be in charge versus that? So it goes really
Interesting. It's an interesting argument. It brings up religion. It brings up God. I mean, this is another can of worms. Maybe another beer or a Perrier that we'll have to do and talk about it from talk about the technology and what it would mean. You know, if we truly get to that point. We should do a follow up after I'm done with my project because I am gonna run with your help. I'm gonna engage you. You don't know this yet. I'm gonna get the photographer to do the photo shoot,
Mm.
but then I want to see what we can create using AI.
So
And
yeah. So this is a good
yeah,
point. I wanted to talk about this for a second. What you mentioned at the beginning, and then we derail as we always do. And is this? So one limitation of today of these image generation models that some companies are not really honest completely in telling you is that they lack control. It is true that you can, through a long operation, can train a LoRa of a series of images of the food that the restaurant of your dad cooks, which is probably unique. Okay, it does it in a way that other restaurants don't do. So what you want to do is that have the photographer take all the pictures of the food,
then feed those pictures to the AI model.
feed those pictures into an AI trainer program that I use all the time, and it will spit out a tiny model, this LoRa model, about those particular food dishes that you prepare. Then you're gonna apply that LoRa to the base Flux model, the foundation, it's called foundation model, Flux. And then you say, from that moment on, Flux has learned to generalize the food that your restaurant makes, which means that I can say, show me that dish, but on a blue plate, or show me that dish on a square table that is in the middle of the grass with a helicopter in the back that is about to take off. All these things that we discussed, right? The problem is that, and this is the lack of control, is that if you're happy to give the model freedom to decide certain aspects of the image, you're gonna be happy. If the model decides to rotate the dish 40 degrees, and so you see one element versus another, and you're okay with that, we're all happy. You're a happy customer, you save a ton of money. But if you want to, today, 2024, September 2024, but if you want to rearrange the dish so that precisely that particular ingredient looks in the foreground and the other is in the background, or you want the light to come exactly from left to right in a diagonal fashion, you might not get what you want exactly how you want it. You will write the prompt, you will put as much effort as you can in writing the prompt right, but the model might be incapable of doing exactly what you want. And there is a reason for this. And the reason that very few people understand really among the users. These models don't have a word model inside them. They don't know the concept of an apple or a carbonara dish or a glass of wine. They don't know how a glass looks like, what physical properties. They don't know what is a sun ray. They have no idea what a sun ray is. And so when you say, I want to move the glass up front, the model doesn't think, okay, because the glass is a cylindrical and is forward, it needs to have this particular image and reflection. It has no clue. The only thing he knows is that he's seen glasses in foreground in another 27 million pictures. So he picks a random one and he says, maybe like this. And it's completely wrong. So this lack of control is what today, 2024, still leads to limited use cases in production. But again, if you're happy with whatever you can, I was happy with having Superman in whatever way the model wanted to. So as long as it was beautiful, mission accomplished. But if I wanted Superman to be really, really specific in the way he looks with the muscle, I might not have had what I wanted.
And I think that goes back to the context to kind of wrap this up. I think that goes back to the conversation we were having. It's that context, it's that awareness, it's that control, it's that more knowledge that you have to give it to train it to understand the way we understand. I think that's going to be the hard part, the long part, the computational part, the amount of data, the GPUs that are going to be needed. That's what's going to take, I think, the longest time possible. And we may or may not be able to get there, but we know how to train this model. It's just how do we get all of this information into this model? That's going to be, I think, maybe the challenging part. And that's where, these chips and the way they are being more efficient, maybe that'll help. But that's still, I would say that's still a ways away before we can get to something like that.
We'll see. In 1 year, less than 2 years, we made astonishing progress. That's one. Two, it's not written in stone that we will continue to use the architecture that we use today.
Currently, yeah.
We could use a completely different architecture so that these models learn a word model. They start to understand the physical properties of objects and how they interact with each other. We don't know this. We don't know yet. The only thing that we know is that today there is no physical limitation for the blocks that could prevent an incremental improvement, either linear or quadratic or exponential. In other words, we have no elements that suggest that we're going to hit a wall. We have nothing yet. And so it's premature to say, oh, we will never get there. If I have to look back at what happened in the last 18 months, gosh, I'm pretty convinced that we will get there. How quickly, don't know. But the data collected so far suggest that we will go there. Anyway, we'll see. Happy to help you with this project for your dad, just to show you the potential.
Yeah, see where we're at. Kind of see where we're at.
And now, a message from our sponsor.
The truth shall set you free.